I'm really glad you could come to learn how to cultivate your hackathon team. My name is Cecilia. I'm the co-director at Son of Hacks, and I'm sorry for all the puns you're about to hear for this entire session. So if you want to leave, you can. I won't stop you. But in the meantime, we'll go over the hackathon cycle. That was weird. So you might not be able to see it, but this is pretty much an overview of what we'll be going over, which is, let's start with your team, making sure it's a welcoming and nurturing environment for them to grow and feel welcome and want to trust people. We'll then talk about how to grow that team so that way they can create a beautiful hackathon. And then we'll talk about how to pollinate your team after that hackathon. And finally, we'll talk about you and what happens when you decide to graduate from your hackathon team. So what are you doing here? Not kidding, there's some good puns in here. Here we go. So you could be a new hackathon. You could be a new member in an already existing team. You could be a completely new team on an existing hackathon. Or you could be here to rake in some of those sweet puns. But you can't because I'm guarding them. Yep, it's okay, it gets worse. Thank you. Cabin member, supportive. So whatever your reason, I want to personally welcome you here because I hope that this presentation will bear some fruit for you to bring back to your organizers. So how do you care for your, you've seen this. So how do you care for your, oh, it's not working, there we go. How do you care for your team in the first place? Well, you need to have a team, so start early, as soon as you can, whether you're running late or not. If you don't start, well, then you don't really have a team, do you? So, doesn't matter when, just start. Putting together your team is the best way to start a hackathon because your hackathon will not exist without a team. But you also need to make sure that people feel welcome, so look on the bright side of things, be positive. And as a pessimistic person, it's really important for me to be more positive. I mean, I'm co-director, I kind of have to make sure people believe in me and the hackathon that we're running, right? But it helps, because sometimes there's some really dark times ahead and some really stressful times, and keeping a bright outlook is worthwhile. Be each other's support. You're going to be working with these people for the next few months to maybe years, depending on how long you decide to stay. So making sure that you have a strong support network, that you trust each other, is the great building basis or roots for your hackathon. So another thing is to provide care regularly. And what I mean by this is make sure you check in with your team, making sure you talk to people, making sure you say, hey, how was your day? Or, hey, I noticed you haven't been really online too much. You're okay? Is something wrong? Do you need help? Something as simple as that is just enough to get someone to say, you know, maybe I'm a little busy right now and I need someone to help me out with my work. But also consider the fact that everyone needs a little bit of a different touch. Maybe someone just needs that regular meeting to keep them in check. Maybe someone needs to be watched a little more closely, or maybe someone doesn't need it at all. But that means that maybe they should be looking out for other team members. Regardless of the reason, make sure to care. So, now that I've given you my reasons, I want you guys to think for a minute and think, how can you make your team healthy? So I want you to root around. We're going to take a minute to think about it, and then I'm going to have you guys break into about groups of 4 or 5 and talk amongst yourself about what you came up with. And finally, we'll spend about another 2 or 3 minutes to share as a group, and I'll call on each of the groups to share. Okay, so you guys have talked amongst yourselves. So who has something they really want to share? Any group? Any people within a group? Was there something that really stood out to you that, go for it.
So we're talking about like how it was kind of really important to let your team members know that it's okay that they are something that they don't know, they can step back, they need to. And like, you might think that kind of doesn't work because now we're just going to
the mic. We don't hear anything at all. I don't hear anything. This is good. I'm going to get her to repeat it. I'll tell her to repeat it.
Awesome. So if you guys didn't hear, she pretty much mentioned that making sure your team is able to come up to you and talk to you and mention, hey, I'm struggling, is really important so you can start building that trust together. Got it right? Awesome. Anybody else? Sure.
We discussed making sure that the social aspect of this team is not overlooked, making sure that people have interaction outside of just their work. We also discussed setting high expectations so that people are achieving goals that are valuable to the organization and also are meeting their potential. And then also making sure that we as leaders are setting goals that are achievable for our organizers so that they have a sense of accomplishment and self-actualization when they're completing their work.
Awesome. That's actually something that we do at some hacks. We always start our very first meeting, like post, previous hackathon starting the next year. We always start by asking, what are our personal goals for our hackathon? And what are the actual goals we have for the overall hackathon and ourselves? Awesome. So we have time for, let's see, maybe one or two more. Anybody else? We can move, oh, sure, go ahead.
We talked about how it's a good idea to plan like specific events that are not necessarily related to planning a hackathon, but like it's just really good for team members. We have like a goal night or something that's completely separated from the planning process.
Team building. Also, just social events, just like you mentioned previously. All right, we got time for one more. Anybody else? Sure.
At many hacks, we have a coffee hour where just anybody from your or your friends can work, come stop by, have some coffee or food or whatever. And you don't necessarily find anything that you hackathon. It goes there.
We should probably practice that. Probably. We're kind of workaholics at some hacks. It's kind of not good. That's why this is happening, to help everybody else learn from our mistakes. So, we can now move on to buddying up. The jokes kind of stop a little bit here. I got bored. There's more puns in the slides, but I got bored in my speech. So some of you guys have actually mentioned awesome points. And we can actually vary them a little bit in these regards. So something that we learned recently was timelines really helped. So goal tracking can also be done through task tracking. We learned that from Shell Hacks because they actually did task tracking instead of timelines, whereas we did it timelines instead of task tracking. So while we're on time with everything, we may not know the exact steps of things. And it's helpful for the overall team to know where everybody's at and who's working on what. So with that, it's also really important to recognize even the little wins. Something like getting a venue, which sounds like it shouldn't actually be that little, but in the steps to become a member event, that's a little step. But it's also important to give credit where it's due. We want to celebrate the fact that you've achieved a goal, right? You've taken a step toward making your hackathon the beginning of success, but then also can be an even bigger success, because our goal is to grow your hackathon to be bigger and better and continue to bloom into a first-class hackathon, or best in show. So the other thing we need to consider is a little bit on the negative side, giving your team support. So mistakes happen. It always happens. We are human and we're not perfect. So forgiving but not forgetting is probably the key takeaway on this slide. As long as you're aware, talking with your teammates, mistakes can actually be avoided. But if they do come up, they're much less detrimental than they might actually be if someone just didn't say anything. So you really want to make sure that people have the safe space they can to speak up. So some ways to do this is to be aware of the situations, to be understanding of people and their own personal lives. Just like you said, if they need to step away, you gotta step away. But make sure you tell someone before you do. So let's jump ahead to the future. You guys have a hackathon ahead of you, and that can be a lot to handle. It's 3 days of you guys probably not sleeping that much. Yeah. So you're managing a lot of different types of people. But the things that we'll be focusing on in this talk, and I hope that you might have talked on the others throughout the weekend, is we'll talk about how to manage your team during the hackathon. And we'll talk about managing yourself. And these are kind of from Sun Hacks with Love, tips that we've picked up over the last 3 years and how to better make sure that we don't hate each other at the end of it, but also still have decent relations by the end of it, despite us not being in constant contact the entire weekend. Starting with sleep and mental health. It is so important to have a sleep schedule. Do not be the hero. Hi, I'm the hero. Don't do that. Don't be the person who's like, I'm gonna stay up the first night, and then I'm gonna stay up the second night, and then I'm gonna crash. Yeah, I crashed the first night, actually. I crashed about 5 a.m., and somebody had to take over my job. It didn't work out very well. They were really tired the next day. Don't do that. Keep to your sleep schedule. Honor it. It is now your code. Having a safe place for your organizers is incredibly useful because that's their chance to take a break, get away from the mess. If there's something going on, they have a place to go resolve it. They have a chance to just be away from everybody else who's screaming questions at them or trying to get their attention to solve that little fire and move on to the next one, because you're gonna have a lot of different fires during your hackathon. So anytime you can take a moment to solve that, even something as simple as taking a breath is enough to recenter yourself. But there are other ways to take breaks. Buddy system, not go 2 by 2 to the restroom. Buddy system, like have someone check in and say, hey, have you taken a break today? Have you eaten today? Can I get you any water? Making sure that you have someone that you can poke at and say, are you taking care of yourself? And also having someone do that for you is super duper helpful, because when you're running around with a chicken with your head cut off, you forget to do all of these things. Human care gets ignored. But you can't give your best hackathon if you yourself are not your best. Making sure you prepare for it. This is super duper good. Find out and resolve your knowledge silos. So if someone goes to bed, hi, that was me, and someone can't do your job, that's a knowledge silo. You have to train someone or leave a frequently asked questions sheet. So for operations, food comes in at this time. This is the contact if they're late. This is the number that was provided, and they have been given a backup number. Something as simple as that. But as long as you know to address it ahead of time, you can solve a lot of these potential problems that could upset your hackers. Food's late. I think some of you know how angry some hackers can get. Or not even angry, just impatient, because we all get hangry. So even talking to the night shift, maybe you might not have a really complex job, but it's enough that you can say, you know, here's my phone, here's what I'm expecting. For the next 4 hours while I go to sleep, this is what should happen. If it doesn't, you know, here's the backup plan, here's this. Again, you need time to address these, so make sure you prepare. And something that we at SunHacks do is actually, right the week before, either the night before or somewhere in that week prior, is we do a dry run. We take our runner show and we walk through everything, all of us in person. And we make sure there's no questions, that everyone knows their responsibilities, and if there are questions, we resolve those as soon as we can. And finally, communication. We actually discovered a wonderful way to be better at communicating. Rather than have a group chat that no one's gonna check, have walkie-talkies. We're gonna go order those probably when we get back, if they're not already ordered. But it's important to check in. Make sure that, hey, I'm doing this thing, or hey, I need help, or hey, I'm taking a break, I need 2 minutes. Really easy to do, really hard to find the time to do. Also knowing who's handling what. Because if you go and do the same job somebody else is already doing, are you really putting your hackathon in the best position? You might not be doing it efficiently, and you might be doing twice the work when you don't really need to. But at the end of the day, you're each other's support network. So returning to that buddy system, you need to make sure you all are at your best, whether it's you need to take a moment or you need to go help someone out. So also checking in on people. Hey, do you need extra hands? It's really hard for that person who needs that extra hand to pull out the extra hand to go text someone like, I need help, something's on fire and I don't know what to do. Because they're probably busy trying to find the nearest water spout to fix it. So what happens after the hackathon? Well, you have a post-mortem, hopefully. This is actually something that we do at SunHacks. We've found it incredibly useful in addressing the things that maybe didn't go so well during our hackathon. But we've also used it as a way to celebrate the things we did well and the things that hackers loved, because now we can say, let's do that again next year. That was awesome. Or, you know, maybe that wasn't the greatest idea. Let's slash that from our next year's plan, but let's, you know, revise it so it's better. And then we also come up with ways of saying, like, you know, it'd be really cool if we did something like this. Or we went to Hackcon and we realized, let's get walkie-talkies. Something like that. Postmortems are great to be done right probably within about 3 weeks of the end of the hackathon. We know you get tired. Oops. We know you guys get tired. We do too. We take a little bit to take a break, but the longer you take to move away from the hackathon, the longer the distance of time, you're going to forget the things that you thought, oh my gosh, we need to remember this for next year. You're going to forget. Even if you write it down, you're going to forget where it is, et cetera, et cetera. So now the important part. Your organizers are leaving, they're graduating, they're moving on, and now you are part of the remaining team. So here's another activity for you guys. We're going to do similar structure, 1 minute thinking, 1 minute team, and then 2 to 3 minutes sharing. But your organizers have left. You've just lost your director of operations, or you've lost an entire team for design, and now you only have your director of design. What do you do? So This is important to consider because as you lose people, you need to go and pollinate and get more people. So I want you to think amongst yourselves for a little bit. Like I said, 1, 1, and then 2 and 3. And I want you to think of something that your team does well or could improve on when recruiting to replace organizers. It may help to think about when should recruitment start, because that is also important. If there's any of those questions, take a minute. Starts now. Okay, guys, let's bring it back. Hi, hello. Interesting conversations, good. I hope you guys have a lot to share. So who wants to share first? No one? Really? Okay, go ahead. I know you were voluntold. Awesome. So update your knowledge base, make sure there's some training. Cool. Anybody else? It's all good. Pay attention here. Nothing's happening in the background. Who else has got something to share? Sure.
I would say this is about 100. I would say about 125 to 150.
Because I remember the measurement after the screen, it was 96. The screen.
96.
96 to the stage, yeah, here is the screen. We don't have 6.
Okay. Just 100 foot.
Okay, so it seems like you guys are kind of doing like a club hub of sorts or having like an open house maybe for the month. Okay, and then you guys have training during then toward the end of the school year. Okay, sure.
What we're doing is, at the beginning of the year, we go out.
The thing I'm doing 40 in November. Yeah. Just want to make sure that I can do it close enough. It depends on how big the room is.
Yeah, yeah. And
See if it gets inspired.
Smaller than this.
yeah.
Okay, which is fine. Thanks.
And then to see actually who wants to plan their own. Just cover all the people.
Cool, so initiate the uninitiated. I can agree with that. We should do that too. Somehow. All right, we've got time for one more. Sure. Oh, we can take you too, but go ahead.
So after we advertise like off applications after the hackathon.
Okay.
And because like yeah, we should go on to the side for hackathon. Because like an announcement after the hackathon, and like hey, where's the application?
That's smart. We should do that too.
Like the day after the hackathon.
Okay. Was that something you were going to say as well, or? We usually do a form. That's not a good idea. Okay, so reaching out to other majors for specific skill sets. Okay, so let's move on then. So you're recruiting actively. Yeah, I did this one on purpose. So you're recruiting actively, but what happens when you have some bad seeds? We have actually had this problem in SunHacks before, and we have actually started to kind of get a feel for the personality who we're inviting in. We want to make sure that they might not have malicious goals when they come in, or have the right intentions but the wrong approach, because then we might be able to work with them or see if that's something we can even do in the first place. But it's important to consider that you want people who are healthy for your hackathon. Otherwise, they're not going to win best in show. You're going to have probably contentions within that, or things go wrong. You might also have people who are great for your hackathon, but they're not really great at the team dynamic thing. So, how might you identify or avoid this problem in the future? Alternatively, if you do have a story that would be applicable, I would encourage you to share, but I also politely ask that because this is a safe space, that you anonymize as many details as you can, because we don't want to make any other hacker or organizer feel unwelcome. So this one will be a little bit different. I actually want you guys to just shoot your hands up and speak. I think this is something that everyone can learn from. So yeah, anybody have anything they'd like to share? So we actually haven't run into malicious people up front. What we've been doing is pretty much saying like, are you interested in organizing? Great, what positions are you interested in? And then sitting down and just having a conversation with them and asking, why are they interested in SunHacks? What do they think they can contribute to SunHacks? And if there's nothing that they know of because maybe they're unaware of organizing, that's perfectly fine. What we're specifically looking for is that someone isn't looking to, I believe the phrasing that was used with the person that we did end up working with but didn't realize they weren't a great fit was he came in saying, I changed my team from 10 people to 100 people, and I want SunHacks to be 100 people. And complete with the intonation that he said, it was clear he was just interested in growing the team, but not contributing to the benefit of the hackers. Does that answer your question a little more? So it's a lot more so in the phrasing and how they're addressing things. There were some other indicators in that conversation that meant that he wasn't going to be a great fit, but he did have great ideas. And we took a test drive, it didn't really work out, so we've learned from that. So now we're learning from those lessons. Yeah?
Sorry, I'm also curious, like that situation, so you said you could test drive and really work out. How do you like deal with this situation?
So, trying to anonymize. We started with, well, I didn't get along very well with him, so he was not on my team, just because we knew that there would be conflict. We knew that he had great ideas for marketing, so we put him on our marketing team with the expectation that we would have to do some extra work to not keep him in line, but make sure that he didn't go the wrong direction or pretty much zoom off in a direction that we couldn't control him. Unfortunately, because we were all very busy, it became a little hard to make sure that he was headed in the right direction, and he took a lot of things onto himself that he felt were the right things, addressed people rather disrespectfully. So we would have to use authority in order to actually communicate with him in the first place. And then by the time we actually had the hackathon, we realized he wouldn't be a great mix for the hackers themselves, and tried to make sure that he was still responsible for the hackathon, but also made sure he didn't interact with hackers too much. We felt that the attitude he was bringing in wasn't the most positive or encouraging or even the hackathon mentality that we wanted hackers to have. So we mostly kept him on the sidelines, doing a little more of the administrative work during the hackathon and even managing the hardware lab toward the end. Yeah. You had something.
Yeah, when we did interviews, we had one person that was obviously narcissistic, and so they were awesome, very accomplished, but yeah, that just wasn't a great fit. And we had another person that was frankly just kind of like dull in a social sense, and we didn't feel like they would interact well with the rest of the team. And that was actually the number one thing for our team, like beyond experience or like passion for the project. It was all very important, but like because we want to be such a close knit team where like by the end we all just want to be like best friends, and we want to make sure that the people we're building were going to be able to do that. So that actually protects them for any other measure.
Awesome. You basically described what we are trying to do, but in a lot simpler words than I did. Anybody else? We'll start here and then go to you, and I thought I saw a hand over there.
So when you're in your squad, you actually have a program director who's gonna come control the place for you, so he would like yell at people and like just not do anything, but he ended up actually firing him, which is kind of awkward. But it's just like
Okay, we did that too.
it's just like it's better like it ended up being better with one director, even though like that's like only one person on it, so it's better to have like to not fill a gap than to like fill a gap with one who's like very
I'll talk a little more on that one after we talk to you, because there's some more that I can add to from our experience with that. Go ahead.
Well said, that choosing someone to fill a gap is not necessarily the best thing. We had a director of one of our teams who we
hit the nail on the head on what happened to us too. So we had a very similar situation where we had a bit of a power-hungry director. They were our co-director, actually, meant to be trained. Were given suggestions on how to improve and took half that, tossed the other half. Didn't really understand how to be in a social situation. We as a group have a constitution because we are an ASU club, and we use those to vote him out, unfortunately. He also came through wanting to make adjustments to other rules that were like, that doesn't make sense. This is quite unfair, actually. We voted him out with the expectation that he would be an organizer and not a director, to use that time to better himself, to take the time to intake all those suggestions and become a leader that we really wanted to follow. Like you said, though, he was very bitter and decided to completely absolve himself of all of SunHacks. So we put in a new director, who actually we had the director replace him, and unfortunately she also decided to completely absolve herself of us for whatever reason, we still don't know. So we were a bit of a mess for a couple months, and so that's why I stepped up as co-director to be the trainee, so to speak, for our younger co-director, who was also elected that time. We are actually a weird sense that I'm a figurehead. We actually have 2 co-directors that are senior. That's him, that's the other one. So when I'm too busy managing things, he's also helping out. We have been running SunHacks for the last 2 years, now 3, and we've also run other hackathons besides that. So we, I think, have a unique case that we have people who have been around for a while, have a lot of knowledge, and really want to see the success of the hackathon. But it all started with a conversation. And that's how our team has somewhat settled. We just don't have enough. That we've had the people that we became friends with, like best friends, with the last hackathon. And now we're trying to build our team, but also learn from our mistakes from last year. Yeah, sure. We don't have a written rule on that. It's preferred to be internal. Actually, the power-hungry director was already replacing us in his mind with his friends from not in the organization, which would be fine if they have the skill sets, and there are quite a few people who do, but the way he was going about it was unethical. Yeah, so, so I think given the chance to get to know someone, we would probably be open to it because it isn't a written rule. Someone can technically just step in if they have the right goals, the right methods. We do also have laws in place to make sure that we can control the situation, to make sure things don't get out of hand and power isn't a mess. So, does that answer your question? Cool. All right, let's take one more if we really want to. If not, we can move ahead. Sure. So you're asking, how can we design the interview to start a conversation enough to avoid the problems, issues, stuff, etc. Sorry, blanking. Right, okay. So the way that we've structured our interviews is actually to specifically root out the things that we know don't really fly with us. A lot of us on SunHacks are high achievers, but pardon the rudeness, no spine. And we need people who can step up and say, I can't do this right now, I am too busy, I need the help. And we're working with our more passive members to feel more welcome to say that in the first place, to help them build their spine, so to speak. But our questions are more so like, what are your goals for SunHacks? Where do you see SunHacks in the future? And it's okay if you don't see it. What are you looking to get from being an organizer on SunHacks? One of the potentially malicious things that we're actually looking for is people who are only interested in industry with the intent of getting a job. That is something we actually specifically kind of filter for. Anyone who's got industry will always get a question of like, what do you hope to do with industry? What do you think industry is? And if they have any inclination toward, I hope I can network with them to get a job, or lean toward the direction of providing myself opportunities, so like a narcissistic approach, those are kind of red flags. But if they're saying like, I just want to find the community, work to make sure SunHacks gets sponsors, I want to make sure that they're better, then it's more of a altruistic approach. And if it's a byproduct that they get a job, no worries. But if it's, like I said, more narcissistic, then it's a little bit more like, let's put you on a different team. You might be able to help out industry. Like if they're still pretty good, but it's not like blatant narcissism, we will try and still include them, but give them a little bit of a barrier to see what industry is about without actually potentially causing problems, because we still want to be open to things. So you have to also balance the, do we want to take this risk? So also, trying to fill a position, not a good idea. So that would be the thing of like, do we really need to fill this position or should we wait for someone to be expert? In the case of industry, we need the expert. We don't want to just fill it. But if we just need people helping out, then we can kind of get away with filling in a little bit and we'll take some of the more risky people as long as they're not insane. So we're on to the last slide. We're wrapping up. And we're going to talk about you. So you are all either starting out, middle of your hackathon organizing career, or maybe you're nearing the end of it. And frankly, are you leaving your team in good hands when you decide to leave? There is a history of organizers kind of just ghosting and leaving without improving the knowledge base. It's really important to improve your knowledge base because the new person who comes in will then have to do your work and then some because your hackathon is probably growing. So you really want to make sure that you leave behind good deeds, updating your knowledge base, updating your community list of the contacts that you've worked with. But I'm sure there are plenty others that you have learned actually throughout the weekend. There's been quite a few talks on them, and if you haven't, no worries. But what do you think you can do to make sure that you leave your team in a better position to grow bigger and better than ever? So help fertilize them. And this is another one where I'd like you guys to just kind of speak up. You can take a minute to think, but feel free to raise your hand. Sure.
I think that like a lot of the talks have mentioned that documenting is so important. Putting down exactly what you did, who you talked to, when you talked to them, kind of what to include when you talk to sponsors or volunteers or people like that. Something I'm somewhat realizing with this talk and also the previous keynote is also really developing and leaving a good goal or a good life lesson that you found with the hackathon, because like as SBU Hacks, the hackathon I'm working with, is developing. This is my first time on the team. I was a participant last year. Just like really discovering the goal and discovering what like brings life to your hackathon, how you can help the hackers, and just leaving that message for the people that follow will probably help inspire them, help to give them like a reason to get through the boring parts or the tough parts, or the like weeding out the difficult parts.
Right. Cool. That's awesome. You had something? I actually am the advisor of a development club on my campus, aside from being on Sun Hacks, and that is exactly my role. I help our our leadership team there to make sure they're still getting the resources they need. With Sun Hacks, we actually have one of our alumni who works at another company and potentially will be the leadership of a sponsorship team that works with us. That was in talks, but I don't know if that actually went through. But the point is she was still willing to come back and help us out and be supportive. And she's actually been reachable with with Messenger pretty much. Like, hey, here's what's going on, what'd you guys do? So, anybody else? You.
I think it's really important to like be cultivating your team throughout like the years, so that when it is time to leave, if your team kind of like you've been like kind of empowering of your own like students to kind of step up. And like I kind of like identify a couple that I feel like are gonna be really good at leadership roles. And I'm not just tell them like, okay, you're gonna be the next head or whatever. Kind of see like kind of like their list and like they're good at, and then kind of like recommend them for interviews for the next batch. So we kind of have people that know the ins and outs for.
Awesome. We still have another minute or two. Yes?
Almost as important as documentation is who wrote that documentation and figuring that out. And like get blamed for who wrote that. Because sometimes you'll read this documentation and be like, well, I see what's going on here. It's like there's some gaps in knowledge that you know. And you being able to say, okay, well this person wrote it, they were there last year. Let me go ask them what they know about this. And it kind of helps to interact and make the documentation more personal. You know, who wrote each thing, reach your alumni network, talk about
You Git blame me? I don't think we should. All right, anybody else got something to share? If not, we'll just open up to general questions. Nope, okay. Well, any general questions for me or, sure. Yeah. Oh no, we don't do a full dry run. No, that's crazy. I mean, you can if you want. If you have access to the venue, go for it. But that's way too much for us. A lot of us actually work remotely because I'm actually on a different campus usually, or at least in the past I was. So I'd have to commute out to the main campus to do Sunhack's work. But what we do for a dry run is we make sure we find a meeting where every single one of us can meet up. And sometimes we'll have 2 or 3 people who are gone, who just can't make it for whatever reason, but we'll usually have like a separate, smaller thing to run through it with them as well. What we do is we take the run of show that MLH has you submit, and we pretty much go line by line saying, okay, the MLH packet is arriving here at this time, and the director of operations is receiving it. Food is supposed to come in at this time, and the food person is handling it here, and this is the contact number for the sponsor who's getting it. If there's anything, say, like opening ceremonies, if we, for whatever reason, pray we don't, haven't decided who's speaking, we decide then, like, oh, we still haven't filled out this bar. Who's gonna handle this? Who's gonna handle this part of things? Do we have someone to help with setup? Do we have an idea of who's going to handle this side of, say, operations when our director of operations goes to sleep? So on that run of show, we actually add in pages for contact, for sleep schedule, for emergency phone numbers of literally everyone on the team, mostly the directors because they're the ones who should be reached when things are going wrong and you don't know what to do, especially if you have organizers who are new. So the end goal is provide information as much as possible that you can reach someone in an emergency. But like I said, running through it's just line by line. Here's what's going to go on at this time. So-and-so's handling this one. We need X volunteers for this. If we don't have, then maybe here's a quick backup plan or who we can pull from that may not. And volunteers are a giant variable that we just figure out on the spot because we try and get volunteers all weekend. And sometimes we have too many and sometimes we have too little. So learning to manage those resources is an on-the-fly kind of job. That kind of, okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Is there a point that you would sacrifice the best or find the best person if you really need to fill a role?
So I think it might be, that actually might happen. So our Constitution says that we are only allowed to be in director positions for X number of years, just to make sure that there's no abuse of power and that we can give others, say, undergraduates. As a PhD student, I'm technically not supposed to be in charge right now. I was supposed to be an undergrad, but she disappeared and we didn't have anyone to step in, so I stepped in. There's a very edge case here. So we do bend the rules a little bit. We'll adjust our Constitution to reflect that because it's an emergency edge case. Usually for director positions, we just won't fill them. We will have those who are experienced step in and help out. I actually, while I used to be the director of Hacker Experience, even though now I'm the co-director, I still manage the Hacker Experience team. I work on marketing, I work on design. I think I help out with operations because we're still training our director of operations. He also handles 2 or 3 roles at a time because we just don't have directors or teams in those areas. We're working on filling those roles, but for right now, it's just too much to train someone to handle it when we already know how to do it. So our goal is, as we're working on this, we're writing everything up that we're learning. When we lost our previous co-director to just her disappearing, we had to go relearn operations. She never wrote anything up. So we've been documenting along the way to help train that new operations director that we got a few months later. So mostly it's, okay, we found someone who wanted to step up to the role, or we found someone who shows the possibility of being good in that role, and we work with them to get them started, and if they actually want to become a director, we'll have the election to put them in that place, and pretty much set them free and say, we're here if you need, whatever you need, we'll take off something from you so that way you can still handle getting used to the role. And that's what we've been doing for operations. Does that kind of help? Okay. Anybody else? Yes. Mm-hmm. Can you rephrase that a little bit?
So I guess it's not like we have a lot of people who are interested in organizing
Great.
our hackathon.
Okay.
But
One
we
trade?
can't have a team of 40 people.
Okay.
At least for our scale.
Right.
But we want to cultivate a community of hackers, people who want to do a bit of programming and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So to lead programming events?
Yeah. So I mean, I was thinking maybe you have like a meeting or something like that. But I don't know if anything else.
I would open it up to the rest, but I'm going to interject with something that I came up with actually this weekend. So with the introduction of the community and the fact that local hack day exists, local workshops, we actually met 3 ASU students here who have hosted a local host before, and we're like, why didn't you email us? Come join our team. We'd love to have, we've been working on trying to start local hosts and local hack days, but we don't have the bandwidth right now. And if there are people who have already done it, then we would say, okay, we'll give you the support and resources you need, but you should start your own team to do that. So if you're not already doing local hack days, local hosts, community events, etc., then maybe that might be something that you can still involve them and say, we'll be behind you as a supporter, but we encourage you to, here's a team of people that are interested in saying, running a local hack day, or something to that effect. And you can be like, if you need help leadership-wise, we'll step in and help out, we'll provide a representative, and start that group with the intent of eventually involving them into your umbrella if it's going to be a hackathon-sponsored thing. Does that help? Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to that? I have no idea if my idea is any good. I was going to try it this year. Go ahead. Okay, so taking on extra roles during the hackathon. Cool. Well, we are actually out of time. So thank you very much for coming. I wish you all the best on your hackathons, and I hope I might see some of you at some hacks, but it's a month away, so maybe not. So maybe you'll see me at your hackathon one day.